Please stop talking about me like that.
Angela's voice trembled, her hands instinctively moving to shield her swollen belly. She stood in the center of my living room, surrounded not by strangers, but by the people I once called my closest friends, and their wives, who sat smirking with glasses of wine, enjoying the spectacle as though it were cheap entertainment. The crystal chandelier above cast shadows across their faces, making their expressions look even more sinister. The Persian rug beneath Angela's feet, the one we'd picked out together on our honeymoon, now felt like a stage for her public humiliation. "Look at her," Paul sneered, his voice dripping with disdain, acting like some holy saint when everyone knows she trapped you with that baby. "Don't fool yourself, man. Women like her don't marry out of love. They marry up." She saw your bank account and thought, jackpot. He took another swig of my expensive scotch, the same bottle I'd been saving for our baby's arrival. The irony wasn't lost on me. He was celebrating his cruelty with something meant to toast our joy. Laughter broke out. Cruel, echoing, merciless. It bounced off the mahogany walls like bullets ricocheting in a chamber. Angela's lips quivered, but she stood firm, her hand finding the back of my leather chair for support.
I married him because I love him. I've done nothing but respect you all. Why are you treating me this way?
Her voice carried the dignity of someone who'd been pushed to their limit but refused to break. Sandra, Paul's wife, chuckled darkly, her diamond bracelet catching the light as she gestured dismissively. "Respect us? Please. Do you even hear how you sound? Always trying to carry yourself like you're better than us. We know your type, Angela. You came from nothing, and without him, you'd go back to nothing." She paused to admire her manicured nails as if Angela's pain was nothing more than background noise. "I remember when you first showed up to our country club. You kept staring at the silverware like you'd never seen a proper place setting." The other wives giggled, their laughter sharp as broken glass. Another friend, Greg, chimed in, his Harvard ring glinting as he pointed at Angela. "Tell me, Angela, how does it feel knowing every time we look at you, we see a gold digger? A lucky girl who stumbled into a rich man's life?" He leaned forward, his breath reeking of wine and entitlement. "You think carrying his child makes you permanent? Sweetheart, rich men have been discarding inconvenient women and their babies for centuries." "Not girl," muttered Lisa, Greg's wife, her voice cold as ice. "A woman like her is just another statistic. Pregnant and clinging for dear life. You're nothing more than charity in designer heels." She examined Angela's outfit with theatrical disgust. "And those heels? Probably the most expensive thing you owned before you met him. Am I right?" Angela's eyes welled with tears, but her voice remained steady. "I worked hard for my life, for my dignity. Why do you hate me so much?" The vulnerability in her question hung in the air like smoke. For a moment I thought someone might show mercy, might remember their humanity. But Mark, the loudest of the group, leaned in with a smirk that made my stomach turn. "Why? Because you don't belong here. Look around you. We all grew up together. We built our lives together. And then you show up. A black woman with no pedigree, no connections, walking around like you're equal to us. You'll never be one of us. Ever." He gestured around the room, at the family photos, the inherited antiques, the symbols of old money and older prejudices. "This world has rules, Angela, invisible lines, and you've crossed every single one of them." Angela's knees weakened, her free hand finding the mantelpiece where our wedding photo sat, a reminder of happier times when love felt like enough. Her hands pressed harder against her belly, as if protecting our unborn child from their poison. But still, she didn't bow her head. I sat frozen in my chair, a prisoner of my own cowardice. My blood boiled at their words, yet guilt gnawed at me like acid, because in that moment I hadn't spoken up. My silence made her humiliation heavier, more unbearable. The room reeked of champagne and mockery. Every laugh at her expense was a dagger twisting deeper into my conscience. And still she stood, her dignity trembling but unbroken, like a flower refusing to wilt in a hurricane. That night, what they thought was just another round of cruel banter would become the chain that dragged them all to their downfall. Have you ever been mocked or humiliated by people you thought were your friends? How did it make you feel? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And before we continue, let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss any of our upcoming stories. The grandfather clock in the corner chimed 9 o'clock, its deep tone somehow making the cruelty feel more official, more final. Angela's voice cracked as she tried to defend herself, but every word was drowned by another insult. She stood in the middle of our sitting room, her ash-gray maternity dress clinging gently to her body, her hands always resting protectively over her round belly. The dress I'd bought her just last week, telling her she looked radiant. Now it felt like a target painted on her back. The very sight of her vulnerability should have softened the room. Instead, it fueled their cruelty like gasoline on flames. Paul's wife, Sandra, sipped her wine and leaned forward, her pearl necklace catching the lamplight. I don't know why you bother answering, Angela. Don't you get it? This is our circle, our history. You're just an outsider who got lucky. She paused to refresh her lipstick, using the reflection in her wine glass. We've been friends since prep school. Our children go to the same private schools our parents attended. You're a deviation, a temporary disruption in the natural order. Angela's eyes flickered to me, searching, pleading for the support that should have been automatic. But before I could find my voice, Greg barked a laugh that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. She thinks she's part of the family now. Look at her, standing there with that belly like she's about to present us with royalty. Newsflash, sweetheart. No child of yours will ever be seen as equal to ours. His words hit Angela like physical blows. I watched her flinch, saw the way she instinctively curved her body around our unborn child, as if she could shield them from the hatred filling our home. Angela's lips parted, trembling with the effort to remain civil. That's cruel. He's your friend, and this is his child too. The simple truth of it should have shamed them, should have reminded them that their venom was directed at someone carrying my blood, my legacy. But shame was a foreign concept to people who'd never faced consequences. Lisa, Greg's wife, smirked and crossed her legs, deliberately slow, like a cat playing with wounded prey. Oh, please, don't act like you're carrying some miracle. Plenty of women get pregnant. The only difference is you made sure to get pregnant fast, before he could change his mind about you. Classic trap move. She examined her engagement ring, a family heirloom that had been passed down for generations. We all saw how quickly you went from girlfriend to fiancé to wife to pregnant. Very efficient timeline if you ask me. The laughter was sharper now, more venomous, cutting through the air like razor wire. Each cackle felt like a betrayal not just of Angela, but of every value I thought these people shared. Mark rose from the couch, his movements predatory and deliberate. He circled Angela like a shark sensing blood in the water, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the hardwood floor. You know what's funny? She acts so classy. But let's be honest. When we first met her, she couldn't even look us in the eye. She was too busy pretending not to notice how uncomfortable she made us. Admit it, Angela. You knew you'd never belong here, didn't you? He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. The power dynamic was deliberate, calculated to make her feel small. Angela's breath hitched, her chest rising and falling with the effort of maintaining composure. Her hands clenched around the fabric of her dress, knuckles white with tension. I never wanted to compete with anyone. I just wanted to be accepted. I've done nothing but pretend, Sandra cut in, her voice sharp as a blade. You wear your little dresses, smile like you're some angel, but everyone sees through it. Don't forget where you came from, a neighborhood none of us would even drive through. She stood up, her designer heels clicking against the floor as she approached Angela. I did my research, darling. Section 8 housing until you were 18, community college, waiting tables at that little diner downtown. Very humble beginnings. The way she said humble made it sound like a disease. Paul chuckled, raising his glass in a mock toast. Exactly. I bet when she first walked into our parties, she had to Google how to hold a wine glass properly. Don't lie, we noticed. He gestured toward the crystal stemware in Angela's shaking hand. Even now, look how she grips it, like she's afraid it'll slip away. Because deep down, she knows all of this will slip away eventually. Their wives erupted in laughter, the sound synchronized and deliberate, like a practiced chorus of cruelty. The crystal glasses clinked together as they toasted Angela's humiliation. Angela whispered, almost to herself, her voice barely audible above their mockery. Why are you doing this? The question hung in the air like incense, heavy with genuine bewilderment. She truly couldn't understand how people could harbor such hatred for someone who'd done nothing but love their friend. But Mark gave the answer, his voice low and venomous. Because you don't belong. Because your skin, your background, your everything screams out of place. And the sooner you realize that, the better. He leaned closer, his breath hot against her ear. This isn't about jealousy or competition, Angela. This is about maintaining standards, about preserving what we've built. And you're a threat to all of that. Angela's tears spilled then, rolling freely down her face like rain on a window. But her voice, when it came, carried a quiet strength that seemed to emanate from somewhere deep within her soul. You can strip me with your words, but you cannot take away who I am. And one day, you'll see it. The words were soft, but they carried the weight of prophecy. For the first time all evening, the room fell genuinely silent. The laughter dulled into an uncomfortable quiet, as if they'd all suddenly realized they were walking on sacred ground. A few eyes flickered with uncertainty, as if they feared she might be right, as if they sensed that their cruelty might carry a price they weren't prepared to pay. But pride is a powerful drug, and they were all addicts. In that moment, their addiction to superiority outweighed their conscience. And I sat, my fists clenched so tight, my nails drew blood from my palms, watching the woman I loved, my pregnant wife, humiliated in front of me while I remained frozen. My silence was a betrayal deeper than any infidelity. And deep down, in the part of my soul I tried to ignore, I knew it. The antique mantel clock continued its relentless ticking, marking each second of Angela's torture. Angela's hands trembled against her belly, her chest rising and falling with shallow breaths that sounded like whispered prayers. The air in the sitting room felt poisoned, heavy with mockery that refused to let her breathe, refused to let her find even a moment's peace. Yet still, she tried, her voice cracking like autumn leaves. Please, she whispered, the word breaking in the middle like her heart. I've never wronged any of you. I've always tried to show respect. Her eyes moved from face to face, searching for even a flicker of humanity among the monsters who'd invaded our home. But respect, it seemed, only made them sharper, more vicious, like blood in the water calling to sharks. Greg leaned forward, his face twisted with a sneer that would have looked at home on a gargoyle. Respect? You think walking in here with your dark skin and cheap grace earns you respect? Look at you, Angela, clinging to his money like a lifeline. He gestured around the room with theatrical disgust. Every time you smile at us, every time you laugh at our jokes, we can see the calculation behind your eyes, the desperation of someone who knows they don't belong but refuses to leave. Sandra raised her glass, her diamond wedding ring refracting the light into cruel rainbows. To survival, she toasted mockingly, her voice dripping with false celebration. She fooled him just long enough to get knocked up. Smart move, girl. Not classy, but smart. The other wives joined the toast, their glasses clinking together in a symphony of malice. Laughter erupted like gunfire, each cackle a bullet aimed at Angela's heart. Each word ricocheted off Angela's spirit, leaving invisible wounds that bled dignity instead of blood. She swayed slightly, her hand finding the wall behind her for support, blinking back tears that threatened to fall like a dam bursting. But still, she stood her ground, her spine straight as a soldier facing execution. Lisa smirked, her tone cutting deeper than any of the men's laughter, sharp as surgical steel. Honestly, I don't know what's sadder, the fact that she thinks she belongs or that she's parading around here with that swollen belly like it gives her authority. You're not a queen, sweetheart. You're a charity case. She paused to examine her manicure, as if Angela's pain was nothing more than background entertainment. And that baby? It's not a crown prince. It's just another burden he'll eventually resent. Angela gasped, the sound sharp and wounded, her hand clutching her belly tighter as if she could protect our child from their poison with sheer will. Stop, she whispered, the word barely audible but carrying the weight of every mother's instinct to shield her young. But Paul wasn't done, his voice rising with the confidence of a man who'd never faced real consequences. You think that child will fix your place here? Please, that baby's just another mouth for him to feed. And when he's done with you, what then? Back to scrubbing tables? Back to nothing? He stood up, his expensive suit impeccably tailored, his smile cruel as winter. We've all seen this story before, Angela. Rich man, poor woman, unexpected pregnancy. It ends the same way every time, with the woman alone, bitter and forgotten. The words landed like blows, harsher than any hand could strike, each one designed to shatter her sense of worth. Angela staggered back, her spine nearly brushing the wall, trapped like an animal in a cage made of cruelty. Her voice cracked like breaking glass. This is my home too. This is our child. You don't get to erase me. The words came out as a plea and a declaration of war simultaneously. Mark chuckled cruelly, the sound like nails on a chalkboard, his eyes gleaming with sadistic pleasure. Erase you? Darling, you were never written in. You're a side note, a footnote in his biography, and soon even he'll realize it. He glanced at me then, his smug smile curving his lips like a serpent's mouth. The look in his eyes was a challenge, a test of my loyalty, a dare to choose between their friendship and my wife's dignity. Isn't that right? He asked, his voice carrying the casual confidence of a man who'd never been told no. The room's laughter followed his question like vultures circling carrion, all eyes turning to me with expectant cruelty. My throat tightened, my palms sweaty, my heart hammering against my ribs like a caged bird. I wanted to speak, to defend her, to rip their cruel words apart with my bare hands. But shame shackled me to my chair, fear of losing everything I'd thought mattered keeping me silent, when silence was the cruelest choice of all. Angela's tears spilled then, rolling down her cheeks like liquid diamonds, her lips trembling but her spine still straight. Even in her darkest moment, she carried herself with a grace they could never understand or possess. One day, she said softly, her voice carrying through the poisoned room like a whisper of divine justice. You will regret this. Every word, every laugh, because cruelty doesn't last forever, and truth always wins. For the first time, the room faltered, the laughter dying like candles in wind. A flicker of discomfort rippled across their faces like cracks in a perfect facade. For just a moment, they looked like people instead of monsters, capable of doubt and maybe even shame. But pride is a powerful drug, and they were all deep in its grip. It kept them from backing down, kept them from acknowledging what they'd become. Sandra broke the silence with a scoff that sounded like breaking branches. Save your speeches, Angela. This isn't a movie. Nobody's coming to save you. But she was wrong. So catastrophically wrong it would have been funny if it wasn't so tragic. Because in that silence, that heavy pause between cruelty and consequence, something inside me broke. Something fundamental shifted, like tectonic plates moving beneath the earth. watching my pregnant wife humiliated to tears, while my so-called friends and their wives mocked her existence. I realized silence was no longer an option. It was a luxury I could no longer afford. The room was still vibrating with Sandra's cruel words when something in me cracked like ice under pressure. For too long I had allowed their insults to pile onto Angela like bricks meant to bury her alive, each one heavier than the last. For too long I had chosen the coward's path, silence over confrontation, comfort over courage. But watching her stand there, tears glistening on her cheeks like stars, hands clutching her swollen belly, our child growing inside her while they tried to destroy her spirit. My shame burned into rage, white-hot and purifying. My voice cut through the tension like a whip crack, sharp and sudden. Enough! The single word exploded from my chest like a gunshot, reverberating off the walls and silencing every laugh, every whisper, every breath. The laughter froze mid-cackle, wine glasses paused mid-sip, heads snapped toward me in disbelief. For a moment, they looked like wax figures, frozen in expressions of shock and growing fear. Angela gasped softly, her eyes darting to mine, searching as though she couldn't quite believe it either. After so much silence, my voice sounded foreign even to my own ears. I stood up slowly, every muscle in my body coiled like a spring ready to snap, my hands shaking with adrenaline and righteous fury. You will not speak to my wife that way. Not in my house. Not in her condition. Not ever again. Each word fell like a hammer blow, precise and devastating. The room that had been filled with their laughter now echoed with the weight of my anger. Paul leaned back in his chair, trying to maintain his smirk but failing, his confidence cracking like old paint. Finally, you are back, huh? Took long enough. But his voice lacked its earlier conviction, uncertainty creeping in around the edges. Mark chuckled darkly, but the sound was hollow now, desperate. Come on, man. We're just having fun. Can't you take a joke? The word joke hit me like a slap, and I felt my vision narrow to a laser focus on his face. A joke? I spat, my fists clenching at my sides, every knuckle white with tension. You call degrading a pregnant woman, my wife, a joke? You mock her race, her motherhood, her very existence, and then hide behind the word fun? No. That ends now. I stepped closer, my shadow falling across their suddenly pale faces. You want to know what's funny? You sitting in my house, drinking my liquor, eating my food, while you try to destroy the woman I love. That's not a joke. That's pathetic. Greg sneered, but sweat beaded on his forehead, betraying his nervousness. So what are you gonna do? Cut us off? Lose your friends? You really think she's worth it? The question hung in the air like a challenge, like a line drawn in the sand. Angela's breath hitched, her hand tightening on her belly, and I could see the fear in her eyes. Not of them, but that I might choose them over her again. My reply came sharp, unwavering, carrying the weight of absolute certainty. She's worth more than every one of you combined. She is the mother of my child, the woman I chose, the one who has stood by me with grace you will never understand. And I will not let you destroy her with your cruelty. The words weren't just a declaration. They were a vow, a promise, a battle cry. The wives shifted uneasily in their chairs, suddenly unable to meet my eyes. Lisa rolled her eyes, but her hand trembled slightly as she set down her wine glass, the crystal ringing against the table. Sandra scoffed, but the sneer on her face had lost its power, looking forced and brittle. Mark leaned forward, his voice low and mocking, but I could hear the desperation underneath. So what, you're gonna play hero now, after sitting there while we put her in her place? His words stung, because they were true, because they hit the wound I'd been trying to ignore. I had failed Angela tonight, failed her spectacularly, and the guilt of that would haunt me forever. But not anymore. You're right, I admitted, my voice cracking with both fury and shame. I failed her tonight. I failed her by staying silent when I should have defended her. I failed her by letting you animals into our home. But never again. Do you hear me? Never again. The admission cost me something. Stripped away a layer of pride I'd been clinging to. But in its place, something stronger grew. Purpose, determination, love refined by fire. The silence that followed was thick, charged with electricity, like the air before a lightning strike. For the first time all evening, my so-called friends looked genuinely unsettled, their cruel confidence evaporating like morning mist. The smirks faltered and fell away entirely. The laughter dried up like a poisoned well. Because they realized I wasn't bluffing, wasn't posturing, wasn't going to back down. I stepped closer, my voice lowering but becoming sharper than ever, each word a blade. You've crossed a line tonight, all of you, and every one of you will answer for it. Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. Because what you did here, what you said to her, what you made her endure, it won't be forgotten. I looked each of them in the eye, making sure they understood this wasn't empty threat but solemn promise. And it won't go unpunished. Angela's eyes filled with tears again, but not from humiliation this time. From relief, from gratitude, from the faint spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, love would win after all. For the first time that night, the power in the room shifted like sand in an hourglass. The predators became prey, the hunters became hunted, and none of them saw the storm that was coming. None of them understood that they'd just signed their own destruction with their cruelty. But they would. Soon. The night after it happened, I couldn't sleep. The sheets felt like sandpaper against my skin, every position uncomfortable, every breath shallow and unsatisfying. I lay in the dark, Angela's soft breathing beside me the only sound in our bedroom, but her peaceful sleep only made my guilt burn brighter. I heard every laugh echoing in my memory, every insult playing on repeat like a broken record, every sneer, every cruel chuckle, every word designed to break her spirit. The image of her clutching her stomach, wiping tears as their wives giggled like schoolgirls at a cruel prank, was carved into my memory with acid. I whispered to myself in the darkness, the words both promise and prayer. Never again. The grandfather clock downstairs chimed 3 a.m. when I made my decision. If they wanted to play games, if they thought their cruelty would go unanswered, they were about to learn how wrong they were. It began with Paul, because he was the loudest, the cockiest, the one who seemed to take the most pleasure in Angela's pain. He ran his construction company like a feudal lord, flaunting his power, treating workers like serfs and clients like subjects to be exploited. But arrogance leaves trails, breadcrumbs of evidence for those patient enough to follow them. I reached out to Marcus Johnson, a client Paul had wronged 6 months earlier, nudging him to dig deeper into some questionable billing practices. Marcus had been complaining about overcharges, mysterious fees, work that was billed but never completed. It didn't take long once someone started asking the right questions. Fraudulent invoices stretching back 3 years, extramarital trips with his secretary billed as client meetings, equipment rentals that existed only on paper. When the news broke across the front page of the business section, Paul stormed into my office like a hurricane, his face red with rage and disbelief. "You did this," he hissed, his hands shaking with fury. "You destroyed me, my company, my reputation, everything I built." I leaned back in my leather chair, my voice calm as a mountain lake. "No, Paul, you did this when you mocked my wife in my own home, when you called her a gold digger and laughed at her tears." For the first time in 20 years of friendship, Paul had no comeback, no clever retort, no smug smile. His empire, his pride, his carefully constructed image, all crumbling like sand castles at high tide. Then Mark, the lawyer who loved to hear himself talk, who'd sneered at Angela like she was some disease he might catch. He'd built his practice on reputation, on the illusion of integrity, but whispers of bribery had followed him for years like shadows. I made sure the right ears heard those whispers, amplified them, gave them weight and substance. The State Bar Association moved faster than anyone expected. Soon enough, Mark was being grilled in a courtroom instead of mocking my wife in a living room, his law license hanging by a thread as thin as his ethics. I heard Sandra, his wife, screaming at him on the courthouse steps, her voice shrill with panic and rage. You humiliated her, and now look at you. You humiliated us all. The cracks were spreading through their perfect world like fractures in glass, and I wasn't finished. Not even close. Greg was next, the real estate mogul who'd mocked her pregnancy, who'd asked if she thought the baby would make her belong. I couldn't forget the way Angela's eyes had welled up when he said it, the way she'd pressed her hands protectively over our unborn child. His empire was built on rotten ground, cutting corners and exploiting tenants. And with the right push, those tenants finally found their voices. Evictions based on fabricated violations, lease agreements written in deliberately confusing language, apartments left in unlivable conditions while rent kept climbing. When the investigative reporter I'd contacted started digging, the stories poured out like water from a burst dam. Families forced out of their homes, elderly tenants taken advantage of, children living in buildings with broken heating and exposed wiring. When the story hit the papers, Angela sat at our kitchen table reading the headline aloud. Slumlord exposed. Local developer's empire built on tenant abuse. She smiled for the first time in weeks, the expression lighting up her face like sunrise. That smile was worth everything I'd done and everything I planned to do. Then David, the investment banker who was always smirking, always ready with the cruelest comment. He thrived on his spotless image, the family man who spoke at charity events and coached his son's little league team. But his mistress, Jennifer, had been waiting for someone to listen, someone who wouldn't judge her for getting involved with a married man. She had photos, texts, receipts from hotel rooms, a whole digital trail of his double life. When the tabloids got her story, the perfect mask shattered like glass hitting concrete. His wife screamed at him outside divorce court, the same lips that had once laughed at Angela now spitting venom at the man who'd betrayed her. 20 years of marriage, she shrieked, her voice carrying across the courthouse lawn. 20 years, and you threw it all away for what? For her? The irony was delicious. He'd accused Angela of being a homewrecker, and now his own home lay in ruins. And finally, Robert, the investment advisor who'd leaned in that night and snarled, "You'll never belong," with such casual cruelty it had taken my breath away. Those words had poisoned me more than any physical slap could have. So I gave him the ultimate irony, the perfect poetic justice. When his contract renewal came up at the firm where I held significant influence, I made sure Angela was the one chosen to replace him. Her MBA from Northwestern, her years of experience, her impeccable track record, all things they'd chosen to ignore in favor of mocking her background. I'll never forget the look on his face when he walked into the boardroom and saw her at the head of the table, her pregnancy showing but her confidence absolute. He stammered, his face going pale. "This is a joke." Angela looked him dead in the eye, her voice calm and steady as steel. "Without me, you're nothing." The same words he and his friends had mocked her with that terrible night. This time, they cut him down like a blade through paper. Their downfall wasn't quick or merciful. It was slow, methodical, humiliating, and very, very public. One by one, the men who thought they were untouchable became cautionary tales, examples of what cruelty costs when it meets consequences. Their wives, who had giggled at Angela's pain, now found themselves social pariahs, whispered about at country club luncheons and charity galas. And through it all, Angela never gloated, never celebrated their suffering. She didn't need to. Her presence alone, her success, her dignity in the face of their earlier cruelty, that was victory enough. When it was finally over, when the last of them had fallen from grace, I asked her as we sat in our garden watching the sunset. Was it enough? She touched her stomach, our child growing strong inside her, and whispered with the wisdom of someone who'd survived hell and come out stronger. "Yes, because you finally stood up for me." Finally stood. Was justice truly served? Or do you believe men like them deserved worse? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and before you leave, Let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss another story like this one.